Welcome to America's Heroes Group.
And welcome back to America's Heroes Group, this time with a roundtable community outreach with Military and Women's Veterans Coalition. Today is Saturday, September 30th, 2023. September is National Suicide Prevention and Hispanic Heritage Month. Our host is Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith. Our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scout Honor Productions. And we have Lindsey Knapp with us, a U.S. Army veteran, attorney, chair of the Military and Veterans Women's Coalition, and executive director of Combat Sexual Assault. We're going to talk about the purpose, agenda, and programs and services of the Military and Veteran Women's Coalition. How you doing, Lindsey?
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me on.
It's our pleasure. So you're an attorney, you're an Army veteran, you're also a survivor of sexual assault and domestic violence. Tell us about what the services that you offer in your program and how that helps people.
Sure. So I'm the executive director of Combat Sexual Assault, and so under that nonprofit, we do two different things. So we represent service members and veterans who have been retaliated against for reporting a sexual assault. And then we help address their legal needs, and that's one side of the house. And then on the other side of the house, we have what we call an empowerment protocol. So as folks are, experiencing different kinds of retaliation, discrimination, and all these things, it's addressing their needs legally doesn't make them completely whole, right? So addressing their legal needs just helps that portion. So what we're trying to do is try to help make that service member or veteran as whole as possible. And so we do that through some different kinds of, we'll refer them to mental health clinicians, we'll enroll them in yoga, in integrative rest. We have structural integration classes, art therapy, this cocktail that kind of helps get them from point A to point B. And then as the executive director of that organization, I'm also the chair of the Military and Veterans Women's Coalition. And what we do there is we're essentially like a conglomerate of nonprofits that are similarly situated. They're trying to help female veterans in this space. And then we advocate nationally on a whole host of issues to include military sexual trauma, but also education, employment, mental health, toxic exposure, women's health, homelessness, incarceration, education, deported veterans, and the list kind of goes on.
So tell us a little bit about, from your perspective, how a trauma that you experience in the military can carry with you after you get discharged and into your civilian life.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So when we experience a traumatic event, our body keeps the score. So that traumatic experience imprints, not just in your mind, but in your body. And so your nervous system is wired like branches of a tree. And when you experience a traumatic event, those branches get pruned, but those branches can regrow. And so what we're trying to do is create the conditions for those branches to regrow. And so a lot of our clients, what they express is that, maybe they were in talk therapy and it kind of only got them to a certain point and they couldn't get the rest of the way. So what we do at Combat Sexual Assault is we kind of help them get them over that hump and help integrate that trauma through their body. And so one of the nice things about integrating trauma through your body, it doesn't sound like a pleasant experience, but you don't actually have to talk about the trauma. And so we're able to get people into different, breathing techniques, movement techniques, kind of retraining the body in such a way to allow the nervous system to settle. And so, and until you're kind of able to do that, that trauma just kind of sticks with you, and then it just manifests in different ways. So when you experience a trauma in the military, that could essentially affect the rest of your life if you're not kind of dialed in to how that a trauma is affecting your mind and body, and kind of realizing that at some point you're going to have to link those two together to really kind of finish that neurological loop and finish healing yourself.
And how would that manifest itself? So if you're having issues in your life as a civilian, but you haven't quite made that connection to the trauma, because I've often heard that people, when they experience trauma, sometimes just bury it, and they don't even, it's almost as if it never happened to them, because they never talk about it. They try not, even though they might remember it, but they still never make that connection, as you mentioned, from that trauma to frustrations and challenges in their life.
Yeah, I mean, and so your body never lets you forget about it. So it's going to manifest in different ways. A lot of times, one of the most common ways we see is chronic pain. So someone will have pain in an area, let's say their shoulder, their back, or their knee, but they don't actually have an injury there. So they're just always in pain, maybe in that area, but don't really have a relation. You can't point to it like, oh, I fell out of an airplane, or or I got in a car accident, or whatever the case may be. Also, it can lead to more serious illnesses. But that's kind of like what we start cueing. We're like, okay, so this isn't a phantom pain either. So when it's like the veteran, let's say they go to the VA and the VA gives them an MRI and they're like, well, we can't find anything wrong. And then that's the next sign to us. Like, all right, well, there's definitely not an injury there. So this pain you're experiencing, it's your nervous system. Your nervous system is an alarm, and the alarm system is going off. And it's going off, God bless it, to protect you, right, from something. And you're not always able to make the conscious jump to know what that something is, but you don't necessarily have to, because you don't have the neural pathways there to make that connection. So what we do through these like different movement and breathing techniques is we just give your body an opportunity for the nervous system to settle, and then once it experiences rest, then it can regrow. Because many of our folks too, they're walking around in a heightened state, and this heightened state has become so common that it's become their norm. And so your nervous system can't grow or reset or even rest when it's in a heightened state. So one of the things that we actually do for folks out the gate, if their body allows, is I'll have them lay them flat on the ground, and I'll have them put their legs in the air or lean them up against the wall. So what that's going to do is that's going to help turn off their fight or flight if it was still activated, and in a lot of them it still is. And then just sitting in that position for 3 to 5 minutes starts to calm the nervous system down. And even in that short amount of time with their legs in the air, their nervous system can start to reset, and they don't have to know why, right? Like they don't have to actually link their legs in the air to a traumatic event. They just have to sit there, and the body will do its thing.
So tell me about life in the military for you as a woman in the military. What was your experience like, and then what advice would you give the people that are thinking about joining the military, if they're particularly the women audience?
Yeah, that's being a woman in the military is hard. I got out in 2008. It was a little bit different then, but I'm not sure it's too much different now. But being a woman in the military, it was having to work twice as hard to get half as far, and I didn't quite, and I was very naive to that going in. My dad had 4 daughters and 1 son and treated us all the same. So I went in with some rosy-colored glasses on, thinking that I would be valued, the same as my peers. And that's how what I thought was going to happen, because that's how I was treated at home. In hindsight, I can see how my dad ensured that as we were growing up, not only did he treat us equally, but he made sure everybody else did too. So he made sure the community, the school, everybody, he insulated us in such a way that was, that I appreciate much more now that I'm older. But going in, sex was a commodity. And I remember the first time I was sent overseas, my boss was like very concerned about like if I was having sex enough, and bought me a vibrator, so it was like very, and that was like one of the first things. It was, it's so creepy. And it was just weird. But being young, and not understanding the gravity of it, I accepted that as something that I just had to endure for the honor of serving my country. So I was just like, all right, thanks for the vibrator, so like, who am I going to report that to? And like, I just put it in my pocket and just kept it moving, like, because I'm there to serve, right? Like we all, this isn't Vietnam. We all signed up. We all signed on the dotted line to be there. And then just over time, it just got to be where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I was getting more and more feisty, if you will. getting more and more irritated about all the disparities that I was seeing. And so then eventually I just got out. I only did one tour of service, then I got out. And then I started helping. I became initially, before I became an attorney, I became a victim advocate down at Fort Liberty, formerly Fort Bragg in North Carolina. And I started, advocating for service members who had been sexually assaulted while serving under Special Operations Command. And what I found there is what I thought at the time, again, kind of naive, where I was like, all right, well, they're mishandling these cases and they're retaliating against my clients. But I again thought, I was like, all right, well, maybe they just don't understand. Like, we can fix this system. We can fix it from within. But I quickly learned that we were unable to do so. So that's how Combat Sexual Assault came along. That's why I started my nonprofit and why I now sit as the chair for the Military and Veterans Women's Coalition, so that we can advocate for, service members and veterans on the national scale and really highlight these issues, because, the system's just not working the way DOD has it set up. And, if we're arguably the strongest military in the world, and if the Department of Defense could fix, for example, sexual assault in the military, they would have fixed it by now, right? Like it's a no-brainer. Like, you hold people accountable.
That they want to fix it? They think they're serious enough about fixing it? Because I think if they wanted to, they could do it. But I'm not sure if they really are serious about taking that task on.
No, they're not serious about it at all, because. And this is what I tell them when I'm like fussing at General Milley or General Brown or whoever I'm fussing at on any given day. If they just held one or two senior leaders accountable for sweeping sexual assault under the rug, the ripple effect that would have throughout the service branches would be enormous. So, like right now, I've got, a few generals where a service member went, to the chain of command. They reported that they were sexually assaulted. The command said, nope, you weren't sexually assaulted. It was consensual. Well, that's obstruction of justice. I'm like, you just charge that general or that commander with obstruction of justice, set an example out of them, letting the whole service branch know that that's not how we do business here. When somebody reports a sexual assault, we refer that to the appropriate law enforcement agency and we prosecute it to the full extent of the law. The end, right? So, but when the person can't get through that first wicket, when they look at and then their supervisor looks them in the eye and says, nope, consensual, get back to work. Oh, yeah, and go work with that person that you just reported about. That is a clear indicator that the military has no intention of taking this issue seriously, because they could do it then, right? Like, they could do it at that very important moment.
Mm-hmm. So where does the Military and Veterans Women Coalition have the biggest impact right now?
So right now we just went through like rebranding and did a relaunch campaign. But what we do is we are a coalition. So what we do is we reach out to other organizations like my own, Combat Sexual Assault, but also like Never Alone Advocacy, 1 in 6, SWAN, POD, Pink Berets, etc. And we just get this huge group of folks that are collectively advocating on very specific issues. So we're kind of building the bench, if you will, mobilizing all these other organizations that are doing similar work, have similar goals, and kind of getting everybody's name on one sheet of paper so we can move and advance these issues forward. So then from there, once we kind of get this collective group on board, we'll go address whatever issue we're addressing that day. And so it varies, but sexual assault is obviously top on that list, but so is like reproductive rights and reproductive health and mental health and homelessness and all the other kinds of stuff. So we go to Congress, we go to different congressional leaders, we advocate for different kinds of policy changes, and then we speak to the media. We try to educate civilians on the issues that are affecting our service members so they can kind of get on board too. But it's really kind of like reminding the people that the power is with the people, right? And that they have more power than that they realize. Sometimes it can just feel like, the government is doing what the government's doing and that we're too small to make a difference. But really the government is far smaller than we are. So as long as we can, remember our own power, remember and find our voice, and that remind ourselves that we matter and that we can do this. Bringing everybody together and moving them forward is the way we get the job done.
Mm-hmm. Now, have you seen impact happening through your organization?
Yeah, we've had a lot of success. We've gotten a lot of congressional leaders to advance certain policies. Lately, our most successful action items are items we were able to add to, like the National Defense Authorization Act, which is a bill that gets passed annually that funds essentially the U.S. military. So we've been one of the things we've been working on is trying to chip away at something called U.S. v. Ferris. U.S. v. Ferris is a Supreme Court case that essentially bars service members from suing the military for negligence. So one of the ways in which, so for example, like medical malpractice. So if you've got a military doctor that does really, really bad, right, a service member is just kind of stuck. So in 2019, we were able to chip away enough, or we were able to chip away at Ferris a little bit in order so now service members can sue the government for medical malpractice, but they can't sue yet for any other kinds of negligence. So we're making strides in those types of ways, getting legislators on board, having them really understand the issues, and then getting some policy changes, written into legislation so we can really move forward and make a larger positive impact on our service members and veterans.
So how do veteran service organizations get involved with the Military and Veterans Women Coalition?
So they can go to our website. That's a great place to start. We're at militarywomenscoalition.org. They can also follow us on Facebook or Instagram. But what we're looking for is folks who are, if you run a nonprofit, we would love to collaborate with you. But even if you don't run a nonprofit and you're just like a fantastic human who's like, this is crazy and I'd love to help, we would love to have you, because we need folks who are, motivated or maybe subject matter experts in their respective fields. So let's say you work in the field of reproductive health and you're not a service member and you're not a veteran, but you know a whole heck of a lot about reproductive health and feel that your knowledge and experience could be very valuable to our efforts as we try to advance reproductive health for our female service veterans, then we would love to have you. If you're good at social media and making flyers and things like that, and marketing, we would love to have you. If you're none of those things, then maybe you come to our website and donate, or maybe you share our page and like our page and really help amplify our message. But there's nothing too small that you can do. Every little bit helps. Connecting us with somebody who you think would be a good partner or a good fiscal sponsor, we would love that connection.
I really like
and
the
just
idea
educating
that,
folks.
I think it's really good that you guys are putting together people who are in the military, but also civilians, because I think one of the things and one of the missions of our show is to shed light on and show the contributions that military family members, veterans have in the community. So we're not this separate organization or a separate group or demographic. We're actually integrated into the big fabric of the country. And you guys kind of represent that because you're bringing all together all these organizations for causes that they're specific about, but then you can, as a group, put more weight behind it and then create a nice coalition to get things done, actually improve and integrate the military members back into the community.
Right, exactly. And it's like, one hand washes the other. So, the military needs the civilians as much as the civilians need the military in this regard, because one of the kind of the beautiful things about as we advocate, let's say, for policies that are specific to veterans, once that framework is set, then that framework just sidesteps into the civilian world. And so we have seen that historically in all civil rights movements. So like the military integrated African Americans into service before segregation or desegregation began.
The
military integrated.
We ran out of time. We have 7 seconds left, but we got to have you back. Come back on our show so we can talk more about it. We want to get more into the military and Veterans Women's Coalition, and also what you do at Combat Sexual Assault, particularly about things you've done in the past in your career. But thanks for your time, Lindsey. I really appreciate you coming on our show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Have a great night.
You too. This is America's Heroes Group. We'll be right back.